and welcome back to my channel. This is Marla. I'm so glad that you're joining me today. We're going to be creating this beautiful spring all occasion card. I love daffodils in the spring, one of my favorite flowers along with tulips. Here is a picture of the daffodils that really inspired my card today. Just look at those beautiful peachy pink colors. And I'll be using the CottageCutz Spring Daffodil die and Accent Opaque 80-pound cardstock. I die cut all of my flowers and the leaves that go along with that. I'm going to do a little bit of ink blending, and then I'm going to add the details with some Copic markers. I have my Altenew stamp wheel mat, which is my new favorite product that I have. I've had the stamp wheel for a little over a year now, but this mat has proven to be a real gem in my craft stash. I believe that they do sell them separately. I will look and see if I can find them, and I'll link them along with the products that I used in the description box below. But this mat not only clings well because it has kind of a suction underneath to my glass mat, but it not only holds my die cut pieces in place, but it also holds my small ink cubes in place. When I am trying to do ink blending, I have fingernails, and sometimes those little cubes are hard for me to hold on to when I'm trying to get my blending brush inked up with that ink. And so having this mat to hold my individual ink cubes is really helpful. I started off with a beautiful peach from Pink Fresh Studio. It is called Peach Fuzz, and then I'm adding a touch of pink with the Cherry Blossom ink. The two colors combined together is just going to give me a beautiful peachy pink that I was looking for. The Peach Fuzz has a little bit more of a brown undertone to it, so adding that pink really added a little bit of that lightness and softness to that peach color that I was looking for. You'll notice as I'm doing my blending that I am leaving the tips white, and I started in the center with my darkest color, and then I brought out that Cherry Blossom more towards the outside of those petals. And that's because I'm going to be adding some details with some Copic markers. I started with an R12, which really was a perfect match for the Peach Fuzz, but I soon found out that I wanted something that had a little bit more contrast. And so I'm adding, I believe this is an R4 or an R5 marker. And by using this red, it is going to look super vibrant, but I am going to get a beautiful blend when I bring in the R12 over the top of it again. I'll also be using an R11 because I find that I wanted it to be just a little bit lighter. If you're not familiar with Copic markers, as you move down the color wheel, so if you start with an R1, you're going to have more alcohol in that marker and less color. When you move up to an R5, you're going to have a more concentrated amount of color than you are with the R1. So by using the R11, which is in the same family, and using the R12, it's softening up that red, and it's giving it more of a pink tone as opposed to the vibrant red when I lay it down. So I started on the edge where I left that white space of those petals. I added the coloring there with my Copic markers, trying to get those lines that were in my inspiration image. The natural daffodils have these beautiful veins or lines that go through them. And I also added a few coming from the middle. I was a little bit more cautious with my Copic coloring in the center of the flowers. I did not want to bring those lines out too far because then I would be covering up my ink blending, and so I started with a minimal amount. I added the tubes over the top of it to see where whether or not you could see the lines from underneath, and then I just extended them a little bit more so that they showed, but they weren't really dominant, and the ink blending would show through. These are, I believe, the stamens. Are they the pistils or the stamens? Tell me in the comment box. I really can't remember my flower anatomy, but I did add a little bit of that cherry blossom to those. And then I will color up. These are the leaves for the daffodils and the stems. I'm starting with a key lime. I'm adding the more pressure and more ink towards the bottom of the stem, and then I'm lightening my hand or my touch as I bring that blending brush up. Where the sunlight would hit the top of those stems, it's going to be a little bit lighter. Where they're down lower, gathered together, it's going to be a little bit darker because it is further away from the sun, and there is going to be a little bit more shadowing. I wanted to add a second color for a little bit more depth and dimension, and so I did use the key lime for that. All of these inks again are from Pink Fresh Studio. And finally, I added a little bit of Ballet Slippers to the pistils or stamens, not sure which ones those are. I want some depth on these flowers, or not depth, I want some thickness to these flowers. And so I did die cut the flowers out a second time, and I'm just adding a second layer to them. It's going to give it a little bit more bulk. Some of these flowers are going to be loose on my card panel, so they're not going to be stuck down to the background, and I wanted to make sure that they didn't collapse or fall, and so adding just this little bit of bulk with a second layer is going to give me that thickness that I'm looking for and that stability. Now I really like dimension with my flowers, and so I am adding these small little foam dots to each of the tubes, and as I place them on the flowers, I did mix them up a little bit, so I am trying to figure out which tube goes with which flower. In fact, that one is wrong. I'll end up fixing that in just a moment, but I'm going to add that dimension with these little foam. They're just little round little squares or little circles, and so I'm just adding those to each of the tubes to give that bit of dimension to the flowers. Here's where I figure out, okay, this one is the correct one, and then I'll move that bottom one over to the next flower, and there's where I figure out which way this goes. Once I finish adding the tubes to each of these flowers, we are going to move on to the urn. So this is the Garden Tub and Urn. I've cut the urn out 3 times, again using Accent Opaque 80-pound cardstock. I'll bring in my mat and we'll do a little bit of ink blending over the top using the Pink Fresh Studio Cherry Blossom ink. Once I finish getting this ink down, I will set this aside and we will start working on the background. I cut a piece of cardstock to 4 1/4 by 11, and I scored it at the 5.5 inch mark. I added a piece of plaid cardstock from my stash, and then I used my Spellbinders arch dies, and I used 2 of them to cut an arched frame. I did add a little bit of foam tape. This is, I think it's 1/4 inch foam tape from scrapbook.com to the back of this, because I do want a little bit of dimension on that arch. Because it's so delicate, I want it to stand out just a little bit more. So we want to darken up that urn. I don't want it to be the same color as the cherry blossom that is on my flowers. So in order to get this to darken up a little bit, I did ink it using my Versamark ink, and then I've added some clear embossing powder to the urn. Once I add the heat to it, it will melt that clear embossing powder, and that will darken up the color. So once I pick this back up after tossing it, you'll see that when I add that heat to it, that it really does intensify, darken that color, and so it's going to set it apart from the cherry blossom that I ink blended onto my flowers. Now, I thought that the easiest way for me to put this together would be to sandwich these little stems. There is a slit. In fact, there's 2 slits in this urn. I'm using the top one only, and I'll temporarily place some of these leaves in. I'm adding a little bit of glue to the bottom of each of the leaves. I added a little bit behind this urn, and I'm just temporarily tucking them. I don't want this to permanently be the spot, but I want to have a little bit of wiggle room, a little bit of stability before I add my back piece. That way, when I place it on my card panel, I'm able to do just a little bit of adjusting. So this is the tube or this flower that has not quite opened, so I did add that one to the bunch. And here's where I'm just placing pieces in place, making sure that nothing is hanging over the edges. Because I do have that foam tape behind the arch, I am going to need to strategically add some foam pieces behind some of my flowers just to make sure that they're stable and flat on my card panel. So this is just giving me an idea. Do I have everything where I want it before I start sandwiching things together? So I'll glue the 2 white urns together, and once I have those glued together, then I'll add those 2 pieces to the back of the urn that has the stems in them, or the leaves in them. So here we go. I'm going to start putting things together. And one of the reasons behind my thought process was not only is it going to sandwich and stabilize where those leaves are, but it also prevents me from having to worry about whether I have a perfect alignment between those slits in those urns. Sometimes I can end up gluing them down, and then I'm not able to move any of the leaves afterwards. And by doing it this way, like I said, it just gave me a little bit more wiggle room. The bottom of that vase is going to touch the arch, so I do need to add that foam tape to the back of the rest of the urn to make sure that that is stable. And then I'll use a little bit of the wet glue where it's going to touch the arch. And everything will be flush once I get this down. And I still will have, as you'll see in just a moment, a little bit of wiggle room with those leaves so that I can get this arrangement exactly where I want it. And there you go. All right, so now we're going to bring those little foam dots back in, and we're going to strategically place them. Now this first one I'm going to place in the wrong spot. I get it backwards, and I'll have to remove it and then add it back again because I just wasn't thinking. So I have it on the wrong side, and I'll start placing it down, and then I'll be like, uh-oh, wrong spot. This isn't sitting flush. So there I move it, and I'll put it down. Now you'll notice I'm not using any wet glue or anything, and that's because what I want to do is I want to be able to reposition those flowers. I'll move them a little bit here and there. I do, before I mail something like this, I will go back in where those foam dots are, and I will add a little bit more glue to the back of it. For the sake of this video, as I mentioned, I just wanted to make sure that those little foam pieces that I used, that I would be able to continue to reposition them because I didn't quite have them in the spot that I wanted them. I could have went back during the video and added that glue, but I'm just going to do it before, actually I'll do it before I put the card away. Typically I file my cards, and then as I use them, if there's any little tweaks that I need to make to them, such as adding a sentiment to the inside or stamping my name on the back of them, I'll take care of that before I mail anything out. This is an all occasion card. I thought that by not adding a sentiment to the front of it, it would allow me to pull this from my stash. I could use it for a wedding. I could use it for a sympathy card, a welcome spring card, summer card, just a hello card. So many different uses. Birthday card for this type of card. That's one of the things that I really like about using florals on cards, is because they can be used for so many occasions. And I really am loving this peach. I know that it is the in color for this year, and I really am loving using this peach color. I think it's very complementary with the pattern paper that I had in the background on my card panel. That is a very old Prima Marketing piece of pattern paper. I haven't bought any pattern paper in quite some time, but I just thought that it was the perfect color for this card and just added to that beautiful spring appearance. I'm going to add a little bit of crystal stickles to each of my stamen, and then that will finish off my card for today. I want to thank you so much for joining me. Please make sure that you hit subscribe if you like this video. And until next time, I hope you have a fabulous day. Thanks so much for watching.